What's going on, everybody? How coming to you live after an instant reaction show, or for an instant reaction show, right after the Georgia Tech loses to Boston College. I'm your host, Jackson Caudell, publisher of AllYellowJackets.com. Appreciate anybody of you joining me. I know listening to why your team lost and how bad your team played is never an easy thing to do, but anybody that does it doesn't go unnoticed, and I do appreciate it. So if you're watching on YouTube, would love a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on podcast review, just leave me a review, 1 star, 3 star, 5 stars, just whatever you think, and just I would appreciate it, because like I said, I know it's not easy for anybody to listen to something right after their team loses. So just gonna give a little quick recap. I usually come during the midweek, but I think doing it like when the loss or sometimes the win is fresh in your mind is also a good thing to do. So look, this one, it was a game going into the fourth quarter, which I think is kind of hard to believe given the final score and how bad the team played in the fourth quarter. But Tech was up 23-17, but I mean, it was just we've talked about it pretty much all season. Like, if the defense is really going to be this bad, they didn't force as many turnovers as they did against Miami and against Wake Forest, because remember, Miami put up 450 yards of offense. It wasn't like they couldn't move the ball against Tech. They just got down to the red zone, turned it over, and then, of course, the fumble at the end of the game. Wake Forest, 5 or 6 turnovers. Like, that game feels like ages ago at this point. But if your defense is not going to stop anybody, you need to be able to force some turnovers and get some red zone stops. And they didn't do that today. Like, they had Amari Harvey had 1 interception, and like, that was it. They didn't get any pressure on the quarterback. I was nervous. Like, I know Georgia Tech was favored in this game. I picked them at the beginning of the season to win this game. They needed this win to get to a bowl game. And look, I won't do too much bowl game talk here. We've done that for the last 2 weeks, because after Bowling Green, I basically admitted that I didn't think they were going to get there, and that that dream was dead. 1 week later, they beat Miami in one of the more unbelievable fashions that you're ever going to see. So, look, this team does seem to play well as an underdog, and maybe they have one more in them. They're going to have to do it against either North Carolina, Clemson, or Georgia, as well as beating Virginia and Syracuse. That does not seem likely to me at this point, but it's not impossible. Anything can happen in college football. Like, anybody who listens to this podcast watches plenty of football. Like, they see it every week that no win's a given. So, but just the way they played today, especially on the defensive side, I mean, they give up nearly 600 yards to Boston College. And look, if they'd have started Thomas Castellanos in that game against Northern Illinois at the beginning of the year, they probably win that game. But this doesn't mean that, like, this offense is just pretty good. It's not elite. It's not – there's not – he's the only really impressive person on that offense. They were down there starting running back today, first of all. They were bringing linemen back from injury. They're one of their better receivers, Ryan O'Keefe. He's been injured for some of this season. So, like, they came into this game pretty banged up, and look, like, Georgia Tech just couldn't stop them. I mean, just like reading some of these stats, it's just jarring that an offense that is slightly above average at best, that has like failed to score on some teams. Like, they didn't score a lot on Virginia. They didn't score 30 plus on Army last week. Like, this is not a high end unit. And look, they ran the ball 43 times for 308 yards, averaged 7.2 yards a rush, ran for 4 touchdowns. Castellanos was also 17-29, threw for 255 yards. It actually didn't throw for a touchdown, which is kind of unbelievable. But throwing the ball, he was just okay today. Like, I know he did hit some deep passes, but like he was kind of indecisive. And tried to force the ball into coverage a lot. And like, I think Tech just couldn't take advantage. Like, that was just the thing about it, is they couldn't get pressure on him. He had way too much time in the pocket a lot, just pretty much all afternoon. Like, it wasn't, you don't have to play contain. You don't have, they couldn't get home on any blitzes. Like, it was just a very poor defensive effort all around. But, Tech's defense hasn't been very good all year. You could see it in the Louisville games and some of these other games, but their offense has made up for a lot of the slack. Like they scored 30 plus on Louisville. They did things well against Wake Forest, hitting some deep passes, but today it's non-existent. Like Haynes, this was the worst game of the season for Haynes King. I don't even know if it was particularly close. Like I know he wasn't great against Miami, but he at least had the redeeming final drive where he got it. But I mean, 14 of 32, 204 yards. And look, if I'm not taking anything away from what he did on the ground. Like he was the leading rusher in this game today, ran for 150 yards, had the big 71-yard touchdown. He was just flat out terrible throwing the football today. Like there's just no like getting around it. Like he forced the ball a lot, forced it into coverage. He just looked like he didn't see anything well. Like, and he looked honestly a little bit like how Tyler Van Dyke looked for Miami last week. Once Boston College took his first read away and made him think and made him go to his second and his third, and he had to get out of the pocket. Like he just was forcing throws, and he just looked like he was unsure where to go with the ball, and he got rattled. Look, he's played really well all year, but this is – I was talking about this during the game. Like this is the third straight game where he's thrown multiple interceptions. It was most kind of excused it against Boston College or not against Bowling Green, excuse me, and just kind of pushed it aside. They were down in the game. He had to force some throws to really get back in it, and it was fine. Like it was, they had the pick six, but it was he hadn't done this all year. We'll move past it. Does it the very next week against Miami. Just starts forcing a bunch of throws. Was very inefficient. And then did it again today. One of my takeaways from this game is like he is becoming a turnover problem. Like he is like he's costing them points, and he is just preventing the offense from moving the ball down the field. And like one of the better things was they were able to run the ball a little bit today. Like they a good chunk of it was him, but they did get 248 yards rushing, average 7.1 yards a carry. But again, outside of that really long run he had, like it was just kind of it was average. Like to be honest, like it was a little bit better than what they've had against Bowling Green and Miami, but it was it was just average. I thought the offensive line was just okay. Like Boston College is not their defense is not impressive in any fashion, but yeah, just a really rough afternoon for Haynes King. I hope he bounces back because if he doesn't, like it's going to be tough to win football games. Like you look at the games they've won, they've either created a good amount of turnovers in Wake Forest, like South Carolina State was a little bit of an overmatched opponent. And then the Miami game, of course, where he did lead him down the field. But he's got to play like he did at the beginning of the season, or else this team is just going to be tough. Some of the things that stuck out to me, especially post game, and I wish I'd have noticed. I wish I'd have noticed this earlier, but on the fourth and it was 4th and inches, 4th and 1 touchdown run that Castellanos had in the fourth quarter, Tech didn't even have 11 men on the field. Like they pulled a Notre Dame. Like they didn't have 11 men on the field, and look, that can't happen in a close game. I honestly, I thought Brinke did a really poor job coaching this game today. Like I think he pretty much admitted as much after the game, and there were a few instances where they had only 10 men on the field. There was a sequence at the beginning of the fourth quarter as well. Like Georgia, it's 4th down, and Tech lines up like they're going to go for it. I think it was like 4th and 7, right first few minutes of fourth quarter, and Brinke calls a timeout. So you're thinking, okay, well, he's just going to get the right play in. They're going to get down there and go for it, and he decides to punt the ball. Look, if you're going to punt the ball, just take the 5-yard penalty and keep your timeout and punt the ball. Like, don't call a timeout, waste one, and then punt the ball. Like that's terrible clock management. And again, it's just he's kind of had those moments here and there. I don't think it's been in as big a moment where people are going to notice it as much nationally, but like he's had some poor clock management decisions, and not having 10 guys on the field, I think reflects poorly on him as well. And look, I did pick Tech to win this game, but I talked all week about how I was nervous about it because of more than a few things. Like the two main things was the type of quarterback they're playing. He is a very dual threat quarterback. He can run the ball. He can hurt you in a lot of different ways. And 2, the Tech doesn't play well as a favorite. Like that's not a secret to anyone anymore. Like Brink, he's been able to get his guys up when they're 3 touchdown underdogs going back to last year when they played Pitt, beat North Carolina. They covered against Georgia, played them tough at the end of the year. This year, they upset Miami last week as 20-point underdogs. But okay, go back to last year. They were favored at home against a terrible Virginia team. They lost by a touchdown. Favored at home against a 5-win a Miami team that only won 5 games, and they got beat by 3 touchdowns. Like, I know Zach Pyron got hurt in that game, but they still lost by 3 touchdowns. This year, they were favored against South Carolina State. They won. They didn't cover, but like that was a huge spread. It's hard to cover those spreads anyway. 3 touchdown favorites against Bowling Green. You lost outright. You're I think the line closed at 4.5, 5-point favorites, and they lost. And 3 of your losses as favorites are by double digits, and a lot of it's because you're turning the ball over like that. He hasn't been able to figure out how to get his team to play well as a favorite. And I did ask him about that in the post game, and like, is there anything he can put his finger on that it can explain that discrepancy? Because it's kind of like it's kind of large. Like, when Tech's an underdog, especially by multiple scores, they generally play pretty well. I think the only time, and this is just off the top of my head, so I could be wrong here, the only time they have failed to at least cover a big spread or make one competitive was last year against Florida State. Like, that game wasn't competitive at all. But generally, when the spreads have been pretty big, he covers and they play really hard. And then when they're favorites, they come out and they didn't play like terrible for 4 quarters, but like the fourth quarter was bad enough to where it was just, it dampened a lot of things. So he said he couldn't really put his finger on it. They just had to play more consistently, which is what you would expect the head coach would say. And look, I just think they might be favored in one more game this year. Like, I don't even know that. Like, they might be favored on the road at Virginia. I don't know. Like, Virginia's pretty terrible, but it is on the road, and like, I could see Tech being a slight dog in that one. I think they're going to be underdogs at home against Syracuse, to be honest with you. Like, Syracuse is 4-3, but their 3 losses are to Florida State, North Carolina, and Clemson, 3 really good teams. And then they're going to be at minimum 2 touchdown underdogs against Carolina and Clemson, and they're probably going to be somewhat around 4 touchdown underdogs against Georgia. So just tough. Like, it's just, there's a lot of just the defense. I'll touch on that just real quick again. One point I made post game was like, I think it's clear that Andrew Thacker's not the only problem. I'm not saying he shouldn't have been demoted or anything, but like, this defense is still bad, no matter who's calling it. Like, they were lucky to force turnover. Like, I'm not, maybe lucky is the wrong word, but like, I'm not trying to take anything away from the performance against Miami. Like, they were able to force turnovers. They were able to force some bad decisions from Tyler Van Dyke and get some red zone stops. But like, none of that was anywhere today. I mean, aside from the Amari Harvey play interception, I think Jalen King had a tackle on a reverse, like 3rd and 6, and they tried running a reverse, and he made a good tackle. Those are the only 2 plays that stand out at all to me. Like, that's the front seven is just not playing very well. It's you look at the numbers, and they're among the worst in the country. And at some point, then you are what your numbers say you are. So it's I don't know that the defense is going to get a whole lot better throughout the year. Like, you also are facing some really good offenses the rest of the way. Virginia's the only one I would say is legitimately bad. Syracuse is banged up, but they do have an identity, and Garrett Schrader can run around. He's not as good of a runner as Castellanos is, but he's a good player. And then you face 2, elite offenses in North Carolina and Georgia. So we'll see what they do next week. It's homecoming next week. The ACC hasn't announced a time for the game, as far as I know. Like, I know it was put on a 6-day hold last week, so we'll see what time they play that game. Could be noon, could be 3:30, could be 8:00 if assuming North Carolina beats Virginia tonight. They'll remain undefeated and should be in the top 10. That Tech should be playing a top 10 opponent next week, assuming like Alabama or somebody doesn't jump North Carolina, which is possible. So yeah, it's 3-4 is not where you want to be. Bowl game appears unlikely, and it was just it's hard to really pinpoint some things that went well today. It was it looked like a funky game right from the start when Haynes King threw that pick six. That was that was one of the weirder interceptions I've saw. Like, it just, tip your cap to the Boston College defender, but just a funky game. And it looked like going into the fourth quarter, it looked like, Tech did have an edge, like they were up, but a horrendous fourth quarter, arguably maybe the worst quarter they played all season. Like, I'd have to go back and really think about that, but just in terms of a single quarter, I don't know that they played one just that terrible all season. So I hope everybody can come out next week against North Carolina. Phil stands up for homecoming, but yeah, I will be back next week to give a full preview breakdown of that game. Again, I know it's not easy for anybody to listen to a instant reaction podcast of when their team loses, especially like this. But if you do, it is appreciated, and I again, I appreciate it. I'm just repeating myself at this point, but I appreciate it. So again, if you like it on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell whenever I put new content up. Listening on podcasts, just leave a review, 1 star, 3 star, 5 stars. Doesn't matter to me. Just give me feedback, give me something to go off of, and let me know how I can make the show better. But that's going to do it for me. Be sure to check out any content at allyellowjackets.com. That is also appreciated, and I will see you guys next week.